Hello, this is Alan Brooks, and welcome to another New Discovery teaching series. Today we're going to look at something I call the Isaiah Mega Prophecy. Why do you call it that, Alan? Well, experts and scholars, God bless their hearts, have got this book divided up into section after section, chapter after chapter. This happened in the past, and this happened in the past. In fact, almost all of it happened in the past, Alan. Not much of it has to do with the future. And why are you saying that all of it does? Well, I'm saying that I made a new discovery that, the entire book of Isaiah, almost, 55 out of 66 chapters, has to do with the end of time. And the reason why the experts have missed it, they are like border control agents for the United States government, but they're border control agents for chapters, which means they only study one chapter at a time. And so you have to get a green card to leak out information across chapter boundaries, right? And so that's why they don't do that. They look at their microscopes at each word and phrase, and they go, well, this phrase seemed to happen back 2,500 years ago. Therefore, this whole chapter must be 2,500 years ago. But what did they miss? Well, you see, long ago when Isaiah wrote this, he didn't have chapter numbers. He wrote out visions. And I saw, with keywords and phrases in those visions, that most of the visions Isaiah wrote about repeated themselves. He started out with a basic vision, and then he repeated that vision maybe 30 times, if you can believe it. And what are those visions about, Alan? Well, those visions are about the last 3.5 years of time. I know all of you have heard about the Great Tribulation, which is the last 3.5 years of time, and that starts when the Antichrist and his armies sweep through the Middle East, invade Israel when Israel's in a false peace, and this Antichrist rules for 42 months, as Revelation 11:2 says. It says the Gentiles will trample Israel for 42 months. So we've all kind of been led to believe that the Antichrist is a peaceful guy strolling through the streets of Jerusalem, and all of a sudden he turns evil, and that's it, and Israel will be fooled. They'll be worshiping him. But that's an urban legend. It doesn't say that in the Bible anywhere. It says that the bad thing Israel will do is sign a peace treaty with Muslim nations at the end of time. It'll be a 7-year peace treaty, although it could be a secret aspect, like, for example, this treaty with Iran that Obama signed. We don't know what the secret details are, and it could be like that, so we need to be aware. It says in Daniel 9:27, he, the Antichrist, will sign an agreement with many. And then in the middle of that, for 7 years, and then in the middle of that 7 years, he invades Israel, and Israel at peace, and it starts the greatest time of distress the world has ever known, Jesus says, when this Antichrist character will be ruling Jerusalem. He'll be ruling Jerusalem from the Middle East for this last 42 months of time. And what I found that this last 42 months of time starts with an event. It ends with an event. It starts with the event, like I told you, that a peaceful Israel will be invaded. That's why Paul said, on the day of the Lord, people will be saying peace and safety, but a sudden destruction will happen. Destruction where? The United States? Mexico? No. Israel. Israel will be in a false peace. And amazingly, what's one of the biggest problems in the world today? A false peace. A peace in the Middle East, peace with Israel. And so the Bible says they're going to sign a peace treaty. It says that in Isaiah 28, they're going to make a covenant with death, and they're going to sign treaties with her lovers, and then her lovers are going to come back and attack her. We see this over and over again in the book of Isaiah. And then, after this Antichrist is ruled for 42 months, the event that ends this last 42 months of time, or the time of Jacob's trouble, as Jeremiah 37, verse 7 says, is that Jesus Christ will come back and destroy this Antichrist. He'll set up his kingdom on earth called the millennium. And the lion will lie with the lamb and all that stuff, There'll be no more, your plowshares will be beaten, pruning hooks will be beaten into plowshares and all that stuff. It'll be peace. Then there'll be real peace in the Middle East. So that's what we have that I found. I made a new discovery, I feel. If somebody else has seen it, well, God bless them. I made a new discovery that the book of Isaiah repeats the same sequence of events over and over and over again, perhaps 30 times. So we're going to go over each chapter in the book of Isaiah very quickly, so you don't have to get bored, millennials. And we'll see what they have to say, and we'll see what the experts say, and then we'll come to a conclusion, okay? That'll be kind of cool, and you'll see how the whole book of Isaiah is almost all of it's about Jesus. It's all about the end of time. It's all about the Antichrist and his battles with Israel. And that's pretty amazing because nobody's ever seen that as far as I know. But God showed it to me because I'm really special, guys. Yeah, I'm special as I'm broadcasting here from the institution with the straitjacket on. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? Okay, the first chapter we're going to be talking about is Isaiah 1. And all the experts say Isaiah 1 happened in the past. But let's look at it a little closer. I don't use verse numbers because it just confuses people. So I'm just going to give you the information. I title this chapter, Afterward, Jerusalem Will Be Holy. Whenever this time of Isaiah 1 was or will be, God apparently will reject Israel's feast and sacrifices. He goes, I reject your sacrifices. He even goes so far as to call Israel a sinful nation and even a harlot. Because of this, God in this chapter of Isaiah 1 calls for Israel to be cleansed and purged and her dross removed. Now, we hear that very many times throughout all the books of the Old Testament that predict Israel's demise at the end of time. And so how will this dross be removed? As part of the cleansing, Isaiah 1 talks about an army of strangers coming to attack Israel. Jerusalem will thus become a desolate city, which is a very big theme of the end of time. During this last 42 months, the Antichrist army will cause Israel to become desolate, which is why it's called the abomination of desolation, Jesus said in Matthew 24:15. And then after all this chapter says Jerusalem will be a holy city, a righteous city. And so the first point I'd like to make to the experts and to you is Jerusalem hasn't been made a holy city and a righteous city, has it? I don't think so. That only happens at the millennium. And then it says Isaiah will be redeemed with justice at that time. I don't think that's happened either, has it? Nope. Then sinners will be sent to hell forever. And no one will be able to quench their suffering. Their worm won't die. The worm, that's the end of time, people. That's not something 2,500 years ago. And Jesus is going to send people to hell after he comes back, right? So this is my logic. This attack by strangers against Jerusalem, followed by her becoming a holy city, who will be redeemed with justice, followed by judgment of sinners into hell, has never happened in history. But all the commentaries say it has. You and I, we know it didn't, people. Come on, that's not happened. And that's what I want to point out. It says afterwards, or after this attack by this evil army, Jerusalem will become a holy city. That has not happened yet, and no one has been sent to hell yet, have they? And Isaiah 2 just comes right out and says it. It goes, the day of the Lord, which is the key end time phrase, and it calls the latter days. Isaiah 2 says over and over, Isaiah, the book says, and Isaiah 2 says, God will reject Israel in the latter days. We just saw in Isaiah 1, he says, I reject your sacrifices, I reject your feast, I reject your offerings, which means God wants their hearts. He doesn't want their acts. And that's what God wants out of all of us. He wants our hearts. In the Bible, when it says the latter days, it always refers to the end of time. And Isaiah 2:2 says, Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains. And this is the millennium, right? This is when God comes back, Jesus comes back, he establishes his house as where everybody has to come and worship. And this is the latter days. This is the 1,000-year millennium on the mountain of the Lord. And this definitely is the end of time. There's no way around it. So Isaiah 1, maybe it's not, but it says afterwards Jerusalem will be a holy city. Isaiah 2 says that the establishment of the Lord's house on the mountain of the Lord happened. This is the end times, people. This is the millennium. It cannot be argued otherwise. Okay? Then Isaiah 2:4 has a very famous verse. It goes, He shall judge between the nations, rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. That's the millennium. So Isaiah 2 is definitely about the end of time. Then it also has a really cool verse, which is definitely about the end of time. Isaiah 2:10 says, "Enter into the rock and hide in the dust from the terror of the Lord." Now, this verse is from Revelation 6:15. "And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, and the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every freeman hid themselves in the caves and the rocks." That's the second coming of Jesus Christ. Can you see that? So Isaiah 2:10 has the second coming of Jesus Christ. It also has the millennium. Can you see that? That's pretty amazing. And it also says there'll be no more war. In Isaiah 2:12, it says the words, those dreaded words that the experts like to ignore, which is the day of the Lord. It says, "For the day of the Lord of hosts shall come upon everything proud and lofty." Apparently, God will allow this Antichrist to invade the Middle East and Israel. And then in Isaiah 10:6, it even says that he actually brings this Assyrian Antichrist against his own people. Gee, why? I don't know. I love Israel. I support Israel. But for some reason, maybe because they start sacrificing again when God has given his only begotten Son. That's just a theory I have. I don't know. Anyway, so the Lord comes back in Isaiah 2. The millennium starts, he establishes his mountain, and peace will be forevermore. So we can see how these first two chapters, we see many end-time trends. God will be upset with his people. He'll reject their sacrifices. But after he sends an army to invade them, Isaiah 1, they're going to be a holy city, a righteous city. And then he will bring, Isaiah 2 says, he will bring, I'll start over. It says Isaiah 2 that the mountain of the Lord will be established, that the kings will hide from Jesus Christ as he comes back. And then Jerusalem will be that righteous city. You can see how Isaiah 1 and 2 are connected. They have connected ideas. They violate the laws of having to keep chapters separately. And then, so Isaiah 2 ends, of course, it's in the beginning, but it's actually, we know it happens at the end, that the mountain of the Lord will be established. So Isaiah 1 and 2 are definitely about the end of time. Will Isaiah 3 also be about the end of time? Maybe, or I wouldn't be saying it, would I? Isaiah 3 once again uses the end time catchphrase, the day of the Lord. He says, "On the day of the Lord, Judah has fallen. Jerusalem has become a desolate city." See, people, have you heard this before? No. We've all been indoctrinated with love Israel, passion for Israel, and Israel. God will protect Israel for all time. And that Israel will fall for an Antichrist at some time, and he'll be a Jew who's their Messiah. But it doesn't say that actually in the Bible. I thought it did, but I never found it. I looked for years, 35 years. And so, anyway, this has the day of the Lord. Throughout the entire Bible is two things. Perry Stone just came out with this recently. It is an invasion of Israel, and it's also when the Lord comes back. We've all been taught that it's just the flam, bam, thank you, ma'am, Armageddon thing. It's more than that. Anyway, so here's another amazing prediction. Isaiah 3 predicts that the water will be cut off from the city. Now, why? Why would that happen? Well, remember Revelation 11, it says the Gentiles will trample Jerusalem for 3.5 years. That starts when this Antichrist invades. Well, what happens during that 42 months of time, that last 42 months? Revelation 11 also says the two prophets of God standing there prophesying against this Antichrist will stop the rain for 42 months. So isn't that amazing how the same God is using the same ideas in the same Bible to describe the same future events, that during this last 42 months, two prophets will stop the rain, and it says that here, Isaiah 3, water is cut off from the city. That's crazy. They'll stop the rain for the last 3.5 years. I think, didn't the prophet back long ago, Elisha, stop the rain for 3.5 years? So anyway, it's going to be repeated, people, I guess. Then Isaiah 4, it says, after God has purged Israel, again, that same word that we saw in Isaiah 1, that, I say is for the end of time, and the experts say happened a long time ago. Isaiah 4 predicts someone named the branch shall be reigning in beauty. Now, what is that? The branch is a prophetic term for Jesus Christ. It says so many, many times in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah 4 says this branch will be beautiful and glorious. That's a metaphor for Jesus reigning during the millennium. And once again, we see the end time events. We see Israel's to be purged by an invasion. Then the millennium will begin where the Jesus will reign. In this case, he's called the branch. Okay, that's cool, huh? And then there's another little end time word phrase here. It's called that only a remnant of Jews will be left in Jerusalem to reign with Jesus when Jesus is reigning as the branch. That's over and over and over. That's what the Bible says, that only a small remnant of Jews will come back and be with Jesus. That's pretty scary. I mean, I love the Jews. I support Israel 1,000%, people. But that's what it says. So we have to be honest to the scriptures. Then Isaiah 4 lastly predicts that the millennium will begin, where the Lord will be the light of the world, and all the world, the light the world will ever need. Imagine that. Imagine Jesus Christ will be literally the light of the world. And why is that? Well, somehow when Jesus Christ comes back, in so many places in the Old and the New Testament, it says the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. So maybe there'll be a pole shift. Maybe the sun will burn out. I don't know. I haven't got it all figured out. But Jesus will be the light of the world. So we can see the point is Isaiah 4 is 100%, 1,000% about the end of time. It has a remnant of Jews coming back. It has the millennium starting. So then Isaiah 5, it says Jesus will come back as the banner. In Isaiah 5, the last 3.5 years, the last 42 months starts again. It says Israel will be laid waste and invaded by the Antichrist, which starts the Great Tribulation. It also says the rain has stopped. Famine reigns. Now, remember, I told you how Revelation 11 says the two prophets will stop, cause there to be no rain. And then also, if you hearken to Revelation 6, which is the same thing, which, just to give you a little side teaching here of the amazingness of what I feel like the Lord has showed me is not only is the book of Isaiah just repeating this last 3.5 years of time, but the entire Bible is pretty much. The book of Revelation is just repeating this. And why do I say that? Because Revelation 6, the Antichrist invades, he takes the peace, and then the other horses cause famine and death. Right? And that's what happens. Then they persecute the saints. And so, whatever, I'm just saying that the entire book of Revelation, the entire book of Isaiah, and most of Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and all of the Old Testament prophets are all about one thing, describing and redescribing this last 3.5 years of time. It's crazy. It starts with an event. They all start with Israel being invaded by the Antichrist. They all end with Jesus Christ coming back. Like Zechariah 14:4, he comes back and stands on a Mount of Olives. That's just insane, people. It's a new discovery the Lord showed me, but, I'm not that bright. Somehow he did it. I'm just a trailer park Christian. I'm not educated. Maybe that's to my advantage. Anyway, it also says here in Isaiah 5 that Jesus comes back in the sky as a banner. And that's another consistent metaphor that Jesus is called when he comes back. We've heard that song growing up, his banner over me is love. So anyway, he's the banner. It says he's the banner in the sky. And it says after he comes back in the banner in Isaiah 5, the Lord whistles for his elect to come to him from all over the world. What does that sound like? It sounds like the rapture, right? That's amazing. Jesus said the same thing. He comes back in the sky, and then a trumpet sounds, and the saints will be gathered up from all over the world in the rapture. Whenever it happens, it happens. If there's a pre-trib, I'm all for it, okay, people? Don't get mad at me about that. All I know is Matthew 24 says, after the Great Tribulation, or after this very time, the sun, moon, and stars are darkened, Jesus appears in the sky, and the trumpet call happens, and an elect are gathered from all over the world. Now, that's a rapture. Now, that's a pre-wrath rapture, but if there's another one 7 years for it, hey, I'm all for it, yo. I know you guys are. So let's don't argue about the rapture. I'm just trying to present a brand new discovery, which is absolutely amazing, that almost the entire book of Isaiah is about the end of time, or the last 42 months, or the Great Tribulation, or the time of great distress, as Jesus called it. Okay? Isaiah 6 then says Israel will never understand what's going on until their cities are laid waste by the Antichrist. And even then, only a remnant will remain in Israel during the millennium. Again, that remnant theme time stamps Isaiah 6 as the end of time. So to conclude the first 6 chapters of Isaiah, I think I've proved beyond all doubt that they are not about past battles, as the experts and scholars say, but they're instead about the future time called the day of the Lord. And when God will reject Israel's sacrifices, he will be very upset with them, so much so that he'll send an army of strangers to invade, desolate, and purge his nation. Judah will become a desolate city at that time, as in the abomination of desolation, Jesus said. There will be water shortages in Jerusalem because the two prophets will cause there to be no rain. Then, after this 42 months of the Gentiles trampling Jerusalem, Jesus will come back as a banner. He'll whistle for the saints to come to him in the air, and at that time a remnant of Jews will reign with Jesus during the millennium, where the weapons of mankind will be beaten into plowshares. Now, isn't that stunning? The first 6 chapters of Isaiah are all about the last 42 months of time. I've proved it beyond all doubt. So take that, scholars. Anyway, and then also to finish up with the last little thing about that, which I forgot to say, Jerusalem, after all this, Isaiah 1, Jerusalem will become a righteous and holy city, where the sinners will be judged and thrown into hell. And that's all that stuff. And then the mountain of the Lord will be established in Jerusalem. Remember Isaiah 2? And Jesus the branch will become the literal light of the world. Now that's end time stuff. All of this are end time events. They are not for the past, people. So put away your microscopes and understand, scholars, that there are messages in the Old Testament that go beyond chapter per chapter. They cross the chapter borders, and so you need a green card, okay? Anyway, Isaiah 7, it starts kind of the story over again. Isaiah 7 talks about Jesus and the Assyrian Antichrist. Well, Isaiah 7 is the very famous phrase that, a virgin will be with child. His name will be Emmanuel, or God with us. We all know about that. That's cool, but we never hear the last part of that chapter, which says, at the end of time, basically, or in that day, the day of the Lord, God sends for the Assyrian Antichrist a razor, who he's called a razor many times in that metaphor in the scriptures, to invade Emmanuel's land. It says Emmanuel's born, God with us. But at the end of time, I'm going to send the Assyrian to invade Emmanuel's land. And once again, there's an invasion by the Assyrian Antichrist to start this last 3.5 years of time. And then Isaiah 8 seems to continue the story, where he had sent the Assyrian Antichrist to come against Israel. It says the king of Assyria comes and invades Israel, but it doesn't say, getting back to the last story I just said in the last chapter. No, they didn't say that. Man, it would be nice if they would have said, I'm connecting a story now. But this is like a movie flashback. He says, we know the Antichrist will rule for 42 months, but it says the king of Assyria comes and invades Israel here in Isaiah 8. But at the end of the chapter, it says the people will look up in the darkness and curse God. Why? Well, think about it. The Antichrist is reign. What's going to happen after that 42 months? The sun, moon, and stars are darkened. The people are going to look up and curse. They're going to curse Jesus Christ because they're Muslims. Isn't that stunning and amazing? Yes, it is. It says, we would know Muslims would curse God. And it says the people in that darkness will look up and curse God. Now that's what's going to happen. They're going to be mad at God. They're not going to want to see Jesus in the sky. They've been taught all their life that Jesus is not real, the real Messiah. That Muhammad he's the real prophet. And then Isaiah 9 is another famous prophecy we've all talked about. We've all heard about. It also says initially that Israel will be attacked and devoured by an enemy. Then we doesn't say that here, but we know it's going to happen. The Antichrist is rule for 42 months. The land will be in darkness, right? And that happened in Isaiah 8. The land's in darkness. People are looking up and cursing God. And then Isaiah 9 says, the Lord will come back as a light in the darkness. And Isaiah 9 is all those famous songs, Christmas songs we've all heard, that at the end of time, the light will come and pierce the darkness. It also has elements of Armageddon. It talks about, the people will be burned up. And then at the end of Isaiah 9, it goes, he breaks the yoke of the Assyrian in his land. And then Jesus will rule from that time forward. The government will be upon his shoulders. And that famous Christmas song we've all sang now makes a lot more sense, because in reality and in truth, it's actually, in context, it's about the end of time, when in the darkness a light appears, and it's unto us a child is born, Isaiah 9. unto us a son is given. That's Jesus Christ as a child. And then he comes back. The people are burned up in Armageddon. Then God breaks the yoke of the Antichrist, or the Assyrian, in his land. And then from that time forward, the government will be upon his shoulders. Now that's what that really means. Not from when Jesus Christ was here as a child, but at that, and now that makes a lot more sense, right? That after he comes back, the government will be upon his shoulders. Okay, then Isaiah 10 reiterates about this Assyrian Antichrist character. So we had the Assyrian Antichrist mentioned in Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 8, and that his yoke is going to be broken at the end of Isaiah 9 after Jesus Christ comes back. Then Isaiah 10, he goes, well, I call it a movie flashback. He basically redescribes or reiterates all this information that he just gave, that Israel will be invaded by the Assyrian Antichrist, which again will start the day of the Lord, or start the last 3.5 years, the time of Jacob's trouble. And then, it says in Isaiah 10 that God sends him. God sent the Antichrist. He sent this Antichrist against Israel, but Assyrian Antichrist, don't get too comfy, dude, because after I've used you to punish my people, Isaiah 10 says, I am going to punish you, okay? Then Isaiah 10 reiterates what we saw in Isaiah 8, that the Muslims will shake their fist at the returning Jesus standing on the Mount of Olives. Isaiah 10 calls this mountain Nob. So can you see how Isaiah 10 is also reiterating the same information? And then it says also another end time theme, a remnant of Jews will be left in Israel. So isn't that amazing? So then after all these things happen in Isaiah 10 and 7 through 10, what would we expect? Well, we would expect the millennium to begin. And what does Isaiah 11 say? It's about the millennium. It says, in that day, Isaiah 11, there'll be a root of Jesse coming back as a banner. That's Jesus Christ coming back, right? He'll stand as a banner, and he'll gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Now that sounds like a veiled reference to the rapture, people, doesn't it? Sounds like it to me. Jesus sends the angel to gather the believers from all over the world from the four corners of the world. Sounds like the same thing, honestly, but, whatever. So it's pretty amazing. Matthew, that was Matthew 24:31. He gathers the elect from the four winds, and here the dispersed of Judah are gathered from the four corners of the earth. I believe that's the Christians, honestly. So anyway, Jesus comes back. Isaiah says that he'll slay the wicked of Armageddon. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. And then he'll judge people. He'll be reigning as the branch. Now we can read in this chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, a branch shall go out of his roots. A spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord. Here, once again, we see how Jesus is called the branch, and he will lead us in all wisdom. Then Isaiah 9 continues, the wolf will lie with the lamb, a little child shall lead them. And we know that Jesus was that little child born in Isaiah 7, right? And in Isaiah 9, unto us a child is born, a child is born, a son is given. For the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord, Isaiah 11 continues. Now this is the millennium where animals and mankind will be at peace with one another, and the whole earth will be at full of rest and of the knowledge of the Lord. So here we see how Isaiah 7:11, just like Isaiah 1 through 6, are about the end of time. And then what does Isaiah 12 says? Sing, for the Lord has done it. Isaiah 12 repeats the end time story to some degree. God was angry with his people, and so he allowed them to be struck by a bad person, the Assyrian Antichrist. But now, after Jesus came back in Isaiah 10, and he set up the millennium in Isaiah 11, he's not upset with his people anymore. The whole earth will sing as Jesus, the Prince of Peace, has finally brought the real peace. Now, don't you have now a new idea, a new version of how these verses and how these first 12 chapters of Isaiah what they really mean? Unto us a child is born, and from that time on, the government will be upon his shoulders. That's talking about when Jesus Christ could come back and the millennium. So it's pretty amazing. The whole chapter of the end of time is there. And we see this all throughout the Old Testament. This is going to be the end of part 1, and I'm going to go to part 2 in a minute. But at the end of part 1 here, we see The first 12 chapters are about the end time story, which is the same in Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and all these chapters and all these Old Testament books. It's the same information repeated over and over again, that for some reason at the end of time, God will be upset with his people, and he will bring an invader, the Assyrian Antichrist, so identified in Isaiah. He's called other things in other places, the Antichrist is. Then what's not said in all these Old Testament places is that the Antichrist will rule for 42 months. I don't know if the prophets just didn't know about it, whatever the reason it's not here, but because you and I are smart, we have to add that in. And that's what another thing the experts didn't do. They didn't understand that these were all the same things, but the prophets didn't put in the 42 months, but we know that's going to happen. Daniel said it 4 or 5 times. The book of Revelation says it over and over. Jesus says it. It says it in Revelation 11 too. It says at the Revelation 13, the Antichrist is going to rule for 3.5 years. It says in 11:2, the Gentiles will trample Jerusalem for 3.5 years. It says in Revelation 12, the nation of Israel will flee for 3.5 years. So it's the same period of time. So we have to add that into all these places that have all these key words. It's not like it looks like at first glance that Israel's invaded, then instantly Jesus Christ comes back. But we know that's not going to happen because we're smart and we put all the Bible together, use the whole counsel of the Word of God, right? So anyway, the first 12 chapters have proved that they're all about the end of time, and they're all about the same themes, that a remnant's going to be brought back, that God's going to be mad with his people, he's going to send an invader to purge them, to whatever, to do what he wants to do, to hurt Israel. He allowed them to be struck. Like Isaiah 10 says, I sent you, the Assyrian, to strike my people, but now I'm going to deal with you. And so that's what happens. God sends the Antichrist. Like Ezekiel 38, it says he sent Gog. He turned around Gog. He put, something on his head like a horse, and he drug him to invade Israel. So God did this. It's not the devil, people. God did it. He's going to use the devil to invade Israel, to purge her, and after he's reigned, the Antichrist has reigned for 42 months, there's been no water, there's been food shortages and famine and death, where the Christians are persecuted. And after that, Jesus Christ comes back in the sky as a banner. He whistles for the elect to come.